Hello, welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic, where I'm going to take a look at two things today. The first is, in light of the Masyu video we did a few days ago, some of you went off and found lots and lots of Masyu puzzles on the internet, and we've had a few requests for how to progress instances where you've got stuck. Now, this puzzle is very interesting. Alex Keach sent this in. This is, I think, a very elegant example of an excellent small Masyu puzzle. You can see it's only a 10 by 10 grid, but there's enough logic in this little 10 by 10 grid to, you can really become proficient at loop puzzles just by studying this one example. So Alex made a lot of progress with it, but I'm going to have a look at it in just a sec. The other thing we're going to talk about today is Slither Link, which is an absolute stone cold classic, sort of nickel-y Japanese pencil puzzle. Again, it's based on the idea of a loop, and we'll see how simple the basic rules of Slither Link are. But a variant has arisen out of the sort of basic Slither Link pattern called Sheeps and Wolves over the last few years, and we got sent what looks like it's a really elegant example of that. So I'm going to try and solve that for you as well. As always, do try and take the time to have a go at the puzzles first before you watch me solve them. I think that is the best way to learn. But without further ado, I will now have a look at this puzzle. As usual, what we can do is we can start with the basics. So, the black square in the corner is going to have to do that. Any black square on the edge has to come out with a vertical angle. You can see this square here, or this line, has to turn now because it's gone through a white disc, and we know it must turn in on one side of the white disc, and it can't turn here. Now, it can't turn into a black disc, so it's going to turn that way, and that means we get to do a little bit more with these two black discs here. What else can I see? This black disc is going to have to come that way, that black disc that way, this one like this. Okay, so we probably end up, oh, that one as well, something like that, and then we're left trying to see what's the next step. See if you can spot it. I guess if you're an aficionado of these puzzles, you'll know this pattern here. So at the corner, when the white squares or the white circles are in this arrangement, this is a classic setup, because watch what happens if this line goes vertical. Now, you've got a choice. You either connect the loop here, and that breaks the puzzle, or you take a vertical line down through this disc, and that isolates the loop. If you do that, you've got nowhere to go with this. So, when we see this pattern, we know this cannot go vertically. So, in fact, this is going to have to be horizontal here. And that allows us to make a little bit more progress. Look. We know this line must turn, but we don't know whether it goes left or right yet. That's going to have to do that. We're going to end up with, I guess, something like this arrangement. This arrangement here. Now, let's start to think about this now. This is where it starts to get interesting. So let's look at this junction. Can this continue? Can the line continue like that? Now, it may not be obvious to you until you do a few loop puzzles, but this is now broken. And the reason it's broken is that when I fill these white squares in, or white circles in like that, I've got two edges of the loop here that both have to escape from this prison they find themselves in. And because even if this comes downwards, you can see it, there's no way of this edge of the loop getting out of this prison without connecting to the wrong position. So things like that you have to get good at spotting if you want to get good at the harder sort of Masyu puzzles. So if we know this isn't connecting here, this must extend down, and therefore this must turn. What next? Okay, well now you've got a problem up here. This is a very cleverly designed puzzle, because watch what happens. The result of this is it's constraining this area, because if this turns right, obviously this can't come down, but watch what happens when it goes vertical. Oops! This is now isolated. So again, not possible. This must come this way now, and This one, we don't yet know whether this is going to come straight down into this or it's going to come up and try and escape. So we're going to have to think about that. This now can't go vertical, so that's going to have to come across that way. Now, what next? Okay, well, again, we've got a problem over here. Watch what happens if we try and take this left. In theory, you might think, oh, well, this is fine. This is not fine. Because remember, this must turn, so this is going to turn into that. Now this square is totally broken. Again, I can extend the line through, but I can never connect this. This is trapped. So again, we've created a little prison for ourselves there. So we know this must turn this way. This now has to turn and go upwards. This must come downwards. And again here, we need to start thinking about what the options are in terms of the number of edges of the loop that are in little imprisoned areas. So again, is that ever possible? No. Now we have two edges of the loop in this area and only one way of it ever getting out. Obviously this can come this way, but that gives us three loop edges, if you like, in one imprisoned area. That's never ever going to be possible. So we know this is not coming up here, so it must go down. So it must do that. Now we mustn't connect these two edges together. So this must go this way. This needs to escape, so it has to come down like this. And now look here, we've got 1, 2, 3 edges of the loop. So we still can't quite work out whether this is connecting to this edge or whether this is connecting to this edge. So what this tells us is that this isn't the place we should be looking next. So let's go over to this side again. And oh look, we've got another, I think, a nice trick that we can look at. So if this connects vertically, what happens? We can then say that must come in here. So we've now got 3 edges of this loop and this area coming, and this one, so 4 edges coming into this area. Now, is that possible? Because let's look at what happens if this turns downwards. If this turns downwards, we know this needs to turn, and now this breaks. You can't go this way with it, and obviously it can't come down because it's going to hit this edge. So, again, we get to make a relatively straightforward deduction. This has to turn upwards here. And now, what would we look at now? Well, we've got this classic arrangement again now with these 2 circles. If these 2 circles are vertically, we go through them vertically, we isolate the loop again. So we know this is a horizontal string like this. That means this is connected like that. This must connect like that. This must turn after the white circle, so it's got to come down. It can't connect here, so this must come down. And we end up, I think, at this position. This looks right, doesn't it? And we now have to just make a decision. Which way does this white square go? Do we come down through it like this? Or do we go across like this? Now watch what happens if we go across. If we go across, that connects with this. This must connect like that. And now look what's happened. We don't actually have to go any further. We can simply count loop edges. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loop edges in an imprisoned area. Now there must always be an even number of loop edges in any imprisoned area, because otherwise obviously the loop will not close. So we don't even have to go about the business of filling this in. This is broken. So this must be vertical through here. This turns. We can't connect here, so this must extend and go up. And you can see now the whole thing finishes off very beautifully. So even though that's only a 10 by 10 puzzle, still absolutely gorgeous to solve. Okay, so let's take a look at Slitherlink now. Now Slitherlink is, as I say, incredibly elegant. So the basic rule is we need to create one loop in this grid, and these numbers indicate how many edges of the cell are consumed by the loop. So where you see the number 3, that means there must be 3 edges of loop around the number 3. Whether it's a 0, there can be no edges of the loop. And believe it or not, you can get very, very proficient at filling in these puzzles with just a little bit of practice. So you can see, obviously, the most obvious thing in this puzzle is that the 3 is connected to a 0. Now, given that we know the loop cannot occupy this space here, this 3 must go like this. And then that must go like this. And we can start to build up a pattern relatively simply as to how this might look. This is going to have to turn there like that. That's going to go downwards. And there we go. We finish it off. So this is the basic Slither Link arrangement. Now, how does this get more complicated? Well, a particularly nice variation that I think is really rather clever. I think maybe this was Dave Tuller who came up with this a couple of years ago in the US Puzzle Championship, and this is from the US Puzzle Championship last year. And the idea is basic Slither Link, so you can see you've got some numbers in the grid there, but the golf balls need to be inside the loop, and the trees need to be outside the loop. So I don't know, depending on how long this video takes, what I might do is I'll come back to this one and solve it. But the one that we've been sent that you've asked us to solve, which is the same principle, I'll show you on the screen now. Okay, so here we go, and thanks again to Otto Janko for giving me some hints as to how to get this puzzle into his software. Now, the reason I thought this puzzle looked brilliant is, let's have a look. Here in this version, the circles are the sheep, so they need to be inside the loop, and the crosses are the wolves, and they need to be outside the loop. And look at the symmetry here. I mean, this has been very cleverly put together. So whoever came up with this, I mean, this looks like it's certainly not been created by a computer. I'm sure this has been created by a very clever person. Now, I think what I'll do today, to avoid this video becoming too long, is I'll talk about some of the ways you need to think about approaching this puzzle, and then in the next video I'll solve this one and maybe the one from the US Puzzle Championship, so that we all can become experts at solving this particular variant. Now, the way I approach these is I actually use colour, because what we need to do is very carefully differentiate squares that are inside the loop from squares that are outside the loop. So as I stare at this puzzle, the first sorts of things I'm noticing are where this square here is connected to a 0. Now that means obviously not only is the X definitely got to be outside the loop, but because there can be no loop line along any side of a 0, that means the 0 is also outside the loop. So, you know, we could pick a colour for outside the loop, maybe purple. Whoops, come on, shade it in purple, there we go. So we could shade all of these X's in purple, like this. And what we're trying to do is to use this, combining it with the numbers to deduce things about the grid. Now, for example, as we know that this 0 has no loop along its edges, we can say with certainty, therefore, that this must also be outside the loop, and this must be outside the loop, and this must be outside the loop. And in this way, we can start to build up a picture of what this puzzle might look like. So have a go at it yourselves, and I'll take the solve further in the next video. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoy content, please subscribe, please give us a thumbs up, and maybe some of you could consider sponsoring us on Patreon as well. That would be great. $2 a month for a handcrafted Cracking the Cryptic puzzle. This month's offering is a between 1 and 9 Sudoku, and for just $1 more you also get a video on how to solve that puzzle. So any of you in a position to do that, it would be really most appreciated. Thanks for watching. Back again soon. Another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.